All right, welcome to our 100th episode Magic in the Room stream. We're just going to do our episode live today. So we're going to give people a couple minutes to find the stream in their feeds and to join. So as you join, if you're willing, just hop on to your page and share this stream with your friends. We'd love for everybody just out in Facebook land, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube to be able to find the stream and join us. So Chris, Luke, Hannah, congratulations on making it to 100 episodes. I'm excited about this. I'm excited for people to get to see a little behind the scenes as we do this live and maybe see kind of what happens as we produce for real. But real quick, we always kind of make this joke about 150 episodes. Why do we talk about 150 episodes?
Well, that's because that's how long it takes to get good at doing a podcast, apparently, according to Neil Hughes. Shout out to Neil, who was our first tech and the person who showed us that it was possible to do a podcast. And he told us right off the bat, well, it's going to take you about 150 episodes to get good at this. So don't worry if you suck at first. Maybe those weren't his exact words, but that was what I took from it.
That was the takeaway. Exactly.
Yeah. And it was important for me because, like, as the resident perfectionist, I was like, no, we have to figure everything out. And so every time we sucked at something or it wasn't very good, or, you know, a loud car drove by the apartment that Hannah used to live in, or a dog barked in my yard or whatever, it was like, oh yeah, you know, it's okay. We still have, you know, 80 episodes until we don't suck anymore. So super comforting and like a joking, like we don't have to have it all together to actually do something cool. So I totally have, this has been an exercise in me maturing and caring about the things that matter and less about the things that don't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 50 more episodes to go.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
2/3 of the way to not sucking. Exactly. And Luke was really transparent about his sources of anxiety. Because, like, when we record not live, you see the lockup in his eyes, right? He's like, that was a dog that barked. Gonna have to edit that out. More time in the editing room. So, yeah, thank you, Luke, for being so good about operating in that growth zone and, you know, just continuing the process.
I mean, you know, what's really scary is we've made such a big deal out of the, 150 episodes until we don't suck. Once we hit 150, like, we have no excuses anymore.
That's true.
So, we're going to really have to have our act together.
Like, really.
You better be a rocket ship by then. Spotify will be falling.
Yeah. We got less than a year to figure this out.
To figure it out. Exactly.
It took us 2 years to get to 100 episodes. I think we've added, a little bit of consistency over that time. We've taken some breaks in the past. So if we don't take a break, we should be hitting our 150th episode.
Right about New Year.
Right? Before this year is over.
All right, so just a reminder for people who are joining the stream, we're going to do our 100th episode of Magic in the Room live, and we're ready to get started. So I'm just going to leave the stream and leave it to the three who kind of started this thing and create the magic as they go. And yeah, again, just congratulations to you three. I think it is a big deal that we're here, and it's fun to be getting to be part of this, do it live together, and enjoy it. And then just a reminder for those of you joining, if you get a chance, share this stream out, let your friends know, and we'd love to have people join us. And we'll be trying to monitor the comments, so if you make some comments, we'll interact with those if we can as we go. So Hannah, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Ben, you're the reason we're as close to not sucking as we are today. So without you being the producer and the man that helps us get better every day, we wouldn't be here. So thank you so much for helping us get there.
Awesome. Well, thanks. I appreciate it and appreciate getting to be part of it for sure. So, all right, I'm going to leave the stream and you all can do the episode.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben.
Well, hello and welcome to this live edition of Magic in the Room. I am Hannah Broderud.
And I am Luke Freeman.
And I'm Chris Province. And today's the day. Congratulations,
Celebrate.
guys, on 100.
Congrats.
Little bit of celebration, a little bit of maybe, monkey off the shoulders here. Awesome stuff. Just, wow, what a blessing, right? So I think about just how fortunate I feel to be part of this conversation and, to be able to connect with courageous leaders that are out there. So I'm going to start the day, like, let's roll through a few questions. So through these first 99 conversations, like, what are some of your key takeaways and highlights?
And I'm going to start with like the end in mind, because something that I've been thinking about as we're like, okay, we're really doing this and we're going to do it consistently and we're going to have these conversations, is I've really thought about, if our average length it's probably 50 or 55 minutes. Like we're kind of long-winded, as people who listen to the podcast know. Let's just call it an hour. 100 hours of what's recorded here. I have 3 sons, and I think about, what does that mean 20 years from now? What does that mean 50 years from now, for kids and grandkids to be able to kind of have a little window into what this time was like? And one thing I really appreciate about our conversations is getting to talk about the things that matter most and that we're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not just about me, obviously, and like getting a record of what I think about things, but it is a cool thing that we have this thing marked down for history that someone someday is going to be able to listen back to. And as my boys get older, you guys know Max, like he's already like our biggest constant listener. So last night he was telling me about something I shared during one of our, questions about what superpower would you have? And he was like, "Oh, Dad, that's what you would do. And that's funny." And, how cool is that going to be 20 years from now if he listens back again to have those conversations? So,
and
super
for the
grateful.
listeners, Max is 10 and he is one of our biggest fans, and I love it. For me, there's so many takeaways, and I'm going to start broad as well. Just having, to Luke's point, this ability to have to kind of document live our process, speaking it out loud, learning what we believe while we're having these conversations, right? And gaining fluency in sharing those beliefs, and then having really meaningful conversations, 100 meaningful conversations, many of them with incredible thought leaders as guests on the conversation. And for me, as I have been reflecting back, like, what does it mean to have had recorded 100 conversations that are moving purpose forward, right? That is what it's done for me. It's helped me clarify how I live my purpose every day in looking for light, looking for greatness, looking for ways to invite that greatness to shine. Whether it's the 3 of us connecting and deepening our friendship and our tacit coordination when it comes to sharing a stage or co-facilitating or being out there working with clients every day, just what it's done, I think, internally for the 3 of us is huge. Just learning how to be a team that like really intuitively picks up on where each other is and how to give room for each other's expertise, abilities, and doing that in a really meaningful way. And then along with that, right, those meaningful connections with our guests and the connections that this has enabled for this community at large of intentional leaders. So that's been, I think, broad level, like my experience of why this has been so cool, and then why all of us is, whether we're on this journey of getting better at this, and quitting has never been an option. We're like, no, we're doing this. We're going to keep doing it because it brings a lot of value.
And with that, like I will say, it never feels like work. You
Mm-mm.
know, it is definitely a labor of love, and I look forward to sharing this space every time that we can get together. Um, a couple things about it's been powerful to talk through what I think I believe,
Mhm.
right? And when we have to communicate those thoughts and how that makes our belief more concrete, it
Mhm.
kind of further goes to this idea like leadership is a conversation. And the more we get out of us and we speak to what the things we might believe as truth, the more confidence we can have in that direction. And then to be able to do that during such a dynamic time. I mean, the past 2 years have been crazy dynamic, and we're thinking about things in real time, processing the same things that everyone else out there is processing, and to be able to do that together. And I think about who we've gotten to do it with, and the awesome guests. You mentioned Shan Hellman. I think about Greg and Gene Allard and John Stewart and Dr. Chan Hellman and Ashley Herney. I mean, and the list goes on. Brad just last episode and that story of purpose. But it's that just one I want to call out. Most of our guests are people we actually work with,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Or in some capacity, and just to be able to connect with such meaningful stories
Mhm.
and how those stories motivate me to be a better insert role here, to be a better brother, to be a better father, to be a better professional, to be a better student or educator. So I do want to just shout that out and say, thank you to every courageous leader, not just the ones that are on the show, up to this point, but if you haven't yet, you will be. Um, and I look forward to that day. But it's just so much gratitude for the leaders that we get to work with every day, and the ones that have chosen to take their time and share their stories out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's this weird kind of collision of all of these different things that have happened the last couple years, and we've just kind of by accident have gotten the chance to kind of have conversations in real time about the importance of meaningful work and about purpose-driven organizations. And it's funny because we've been talking about purposeful organizations and meaningful work and doing things that are important and getting clarity about what is the highest good an organization can achieve in the community and in the world around it for 12 years, right? We all met together about 12 years ago in grad school, started these conversations, learned a lot, applied it back in kind of our first careers for a few years, and then have been doing this work. And then all of a sudden, how crazy that just a couple months after we started recording, episode number one, the world goes crazy with COVID and global pandemic. And then all of the ball starts rolling around the market saying, hey, we're kind of tired of just showing up, hitting the clock, doing what's expected of us, not asking any questions about why we're doing what we're doing, and going home and just trading and transacting our hours for dollars. And a lot of people had just had enough.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm really grateful that while the market of employees out there in the US were kind of having this realization, that we've been able to have conversations about like, well, what is best practice in discovering what the highest possible good an organization can achieve is, and talking with leaders who are out there trying to figure it out, and us trying to figure it out with clients and help them along as they're meeting that demand and those questions from their team members, and being able to bring those best practice back and share with a wider community. Like, just kind of the beauty of all of those paths colliding is
Mhm.
really amazing. And yeah, just full of gratitude.
Yeah. You've alluded to or mentioned a couple times, Luke, the time frame, right? So we've been doing this for 2 years now. I think we started recording in late 2019, but we actually released our first episode, I believe it was February of 2020. And we all know what happened from there on, and in March, and how crazy the world got. And yet we continued this practice of having these conversations and had this like really unique ability to kind of record live thought processes while the world was changing dramatically. And, we were able to continue to do that thanks to technology, right? We'd started recording remotely and continued that practice over those months of lockdown. And then eventually when things started opening back up, we had the ability to be in a studio and kind of up our production value a little bit. But there are some recordings of me, for example. I was going through a lot of personal change, and I was moving, and I was in different locations. And even just some of those recordings of like me seeing where I was and just how my personal life was changing while the whole world was changing. All the while we continued to have these conversations. And it's been, to your point, Chris, a labor of love. There were definitely months when we would record early on a Sunday morning because it was the only time in the calendar that would allow. And that meant for me 6 or 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and never had any hesitation about doing it, right? Because this feels purposeful. Chris, you're muted. We had to throw in a little.
Gotta get one in, right?
Yeah, we got 50 more episodes before you can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
so you're good. You're good.
Yeah. So I want to go back to thinking about I love the historical record, the album that's created, and the library for reference. But I want to go back to something, Luke. I remember like when we were in the trailer, I think episode 1, like we're in your camper recording that episode. I think audio only, right? But it was.
Video too. We
okay, it's out there.
Video.
It's out there for video record.
Yeah.
But I remember the conversation. It was, at the core of all this, organizations are counted on to do more things today than ever before. There has been a definite modification in the last 50 years of the family structure and work dynamics within the family. There's been a rapid kind of exodus, what I'd say, from the church, right? Going from 75% participation as late as the early 80s to now under 50%. But it doesn't change the needs of a community. And in all of us, like people have that need to feel seen, heard, understood, part of something bigger. If they're not getting that from the organizations and the community, and the organizations aren't having that community impact, then where can it come from? And I think that first seed kind of created the dialogue, and there's that vein that runs through everything. But I was having a conversation with Jean Allert last week, and we were speaking to, we can either do work that is life-giving and has generational impact for our families and communities, or we can take on work that is life-depleting, right? And maybe violates who we believe ourselves to be. How much of what we do is about inspiring the confidence to follow your own compass?
Yeah, I mean, I think a ton of it, right? And I was thinking back about just aha moments that I've had while recording that have really stuck with me. And a recent example is whenever, I don't remember which of you had gone to a conference or to a seminar where someone was talking about compensation models.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically like described this old school, like if you go to SHRM, right, what they're going to say around, well, it's like the value someone provides to the organization. Somehow you mix that in with what the market expectation is, and like that's what compensation and benefit should equal. Just like the fact that we had talked about it so much made it really easy for us to say, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
There's another way that is people donate the margin between the value they provide in the organization and their compensation, right? There's a gap there because everyone provides more value to the organization than what they get paid, right? And they donate that gap to the purpose of the organization. Having that clarity around, well, that's why we need to have purposeful organizations. That's why having a clear shared purpose, clarifying our values, understanding the behaviors that we commit to in the organization that help us move towards that shared purpose. We clarify that because it invites people then to contribute as much as they want, as much as they believe in our shared purpose. They can contribute extra above and beyond, right, what they're compensated for in value to the organization based on that shared belief and shared purpose. And I don't think we would have been able to understand it as quickly. It would have like stuck in our craw. You know, it would have been like, oh, that's so transactional. Yeah, that doesn't feel right. That's dehumanizing. But like, no, there's a different compensation model that based on 100 hours of conversation, you know, we've really been able to build out and get clarity on as we've had these conversations. So yeah.
And that was the learning too, was about, and first I do want to just, I don't think everyone creates more value for the organization than what they get paid. Sometimes the gap goes the other way too.
But, you know, I'm an optimist.
I know.
Right?
I know.
They
but
should,
general,
right? In a great organization, that's the model, right? That's what we're shooting for. Yeah.
That's what we're shooting for. But the conversation has always been, it's been one way. It's about what does the employee or the team member or the leader contribute to the organization. The conversation has not been about what does the organization contribute to the individual and what is the responsibility of the organization to contribute back that is of value beyond the transactional, right? If the only reason people work for you is their paycheck, you're only as good as their next offer. And as soon as that next offer comes along, they're out because, you know, there hasn't been any other value created. When people are willing to give more of their margin of discretionary effort, donate their energy and time towards the purpose of the organization because it's meaningful, they can connect with it. You know, there's a higher value. It's something transformational rather than transactional. And when we flip the script and look at, okay, what value does the organization provide for individuals and beyond the paycheck and the benefits, that's when we really have this exponential value equation that leads to higher engagement, higher performance on every metric.
Yeah, and I kind of exactly in the being able to openly accept that I am giving discretionary effort so that the organization can succeed, in creating really these social contracts between myself as a team member and trusting that the organization understands their role in recognizing needs. And I think the dynamics of where we're headed look more like, if we talk about compensation 2.0, and these are conversations I'm looking forward to having, but is it not just about, you know, cost of recognition in the form of traditional recognition programs, but just recognizing the needs of those team member sets? Like, some need transportation, sometimes, you know, it's community service opportunities, sometimes it's development opportunities. It might be more time off, it could be food security, it could be housing. But, you know, we talked about the degradation in the effectiveness of government, that in some ways the effectiveness of our family structures. Well, something has to fill that gap, something with resource, something with leadership. And if it's not our enterprise structures, I don't know where else it comes from.
Yeah, and I think that's why we talk about courageous leadership so much, because a lot of this comes down to, what game are you playing? What game do you understand? that you're playing. And if we think as leaders that we get to kind of show up, do the bare minimum, pay people for their time, and go home, like that's not who our community is. That's not who the listeners are of this podcast. And that's been a hugely valuable thing for me, is creating this community of courageous leaders who say, I'm going to take on more than what previous generations of business leaders took on. And I'm going to really stretch myself to be creative and think about what is my responsibility as someone with resource, and as someone with influence, and as someone who really gets to set the stage for what people experience for a huge chunk of their lives. And, we were talking about this the other day. Ben and I were driving back from a workshop that we did. And, I'm going to go back, Chris, to what you shared about kind of the devolution of maybe religious infrastructure, social infrastructure, family infrastructure. And we were talking about kind of religious infrastructure tie-in, and this story of the Good Samaritan came up. And for those of you who maybe don't have that context, Jesus is telling the story about this guy who's beat up and he's been robbed on the side of the road. And these religious leaders go by, and all of these people who are culturally different from him, until finally this guy comes who sees him as a human being and says, I'm going to take responsibility for this issue, and provides care there. And, in the picture, or in the story, the picture of that person who makes that choice to be a courageous leader and to have a positive impact is someone who's different from the person who has been beat up, right? They have every excuse to walk by. They have a different life. They have different value set, whatever it is, but they choose to be courageous and say, no, that person laying in the ditch is inside my circle of influence. I'm going to notice them. I'm going to choose to do something about this need. And all right, what's my plan? What am I going to do? And so to tie that back, like when we say courageous leaders, I think that's what we mean, is people who could just keep it on cruise control and keep going and say, well, I'm the founder, I'm the owner, I'm the CEO, I'm on the ELT, like we're doing okay. My primary responsibility is the P&L. My primary responsibility is, financial sustainability, whatever it is. I don't have to think about, am I creating meaningful work? Am I building character in my team members because of the work that we do? Am I creating a community with the people who work here? I think courageous leaders say, yes, 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 yes. All of that's my responsibility because I'm a leader. And so really, I don't know. I've strayed here down a long tangent, but I think it's the heart of a lot of what we've found to be passionate about. And as we talk to leaders who figured out the last couple years and who say, I don't have retention issues, I'm not hurting for staff, like there's a common theme there, is that they've said, yes, I take responsibility for everything that I see in my circle of influence.
Yeah. And right, it's kind of like, well, we have, wage compression and entry wage problems and this, that, and the other. Let's go do a wage study. Let's implement these things. When it's honestly like, well, what do you believe about compensation? What do you believe? Because a lot of the wage studies are just going to be out there studying broken systems based on a compensation model that no longer holds true. Courageous leaders define their own compensation model and create disruptive compensation. And like that's, I'll just call it out. Like that's why we speak against some of the SHRM modeling. Here's these best practices for people that are naturally fluid, where systems are always changing. There's market dynamics involved, and these practices are supposed to be finite. And it's just not, that is not a best practice. And to be unapologetic about believing differently, I think that's where some effectiveness lies. And that's where we see organizations that are thriving today are cutting their path based on what they believe and their purpose and the community they're trying to get to thrive. So, well,
Yeah,
let's.
I
Go ahead.
think, yeah, I'm going to pile on there. If you listen back to the episode with Greg Robinson where we're talking about leadership, and you can probably hear me if you listen to it, like finally make the transition where I stop trying to use science and organizational and social psychology, which is what I know and what I'm good at, to define leadership through competencies or through practices or through assumptions about what a leader is, whatever, all the nerdy stuff. And start to really accept, like, like, I don't think we can't program character out of what is a leader. And once I made that switch, which happened like on a podcast, in an interview, where I started to just say, okay, like, I don't have to apologize for saying like there are high character leaders and low character leaders. It's really reframed a lot of these conversations, because as we've talked about, you're talking about compensation, but as we've also talked about diversity, inclusion efforts, environmental efforts, sustainability efforts, I think there's a lot of power in saying you have a choice as a leader to outsource your character or to own your character. And when we outsource all of those practices and say, Wall Street, you tell me best practice, you tell me the bare minimum hurdle that I need to go over, to some degree, that's outsourcing character instead of really doing the work to say, what am I convicted that we need to do as a team of leaders leading this organization? And what are we going to do about it? And of course, that goes back to what's our purpose as an organization, and what are the things that we truly value, and how do we continue to live into those values as we move forward?
Hannah, any thoughts on that? You're muted. Ha ha.
The best part of that is, like, now I'm the only one that hasn't done it. So I'm just going to try super hard the rest of this to not do it, and then I will win.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, pile on the technical difficulties and finding the mute button too. Then you've got
in a different place today.
Definitely in a different place. Yeah. No, I think to me it's just like all so salient, having these conversations. And it goes back to the whole, point that we made earlier. It's where we think we know what we believe. We start having conversations. We get real-time feedback and input that helps to shape those beliefs and clarify the beliefs so we can make them explicit, right? Another episode like that did a similar thing for me was Dr. Chan Hellman on hope theory, right? I was preaching back in my, corporate sales training days that hope is not a strategy, because there's a book that's called that. But that was kind of the ongoing theme, right? Of have clear goals, have a clear strategy. And there was this, equation of hope to wishful thinking. And so the big learning for me there in that moment was hope is not the same thing as wishful thinking. It can be part of a strategy when you fully understand what hope actually is, right? It is the belief that tomorrow can be better than today and that I have the power to make it so. And there's three things that are part of that, right? You've got to have a desirable goal. There's something you want to happen. So it starts with a wish or a vision. And then there's clear pathways, right? You can see the path to get there. And then you have agency. You believe that you have the personal power to change your circumstances so that you can meet the goal. And that was just such a, mind-bending kind of experience, right? Of redefining a word into a much more expansive and useful life strategy, right? Business strategy, personal strategy. Understanding what hope is for us personally and the leaders role in instilling hope into the people that follow and that are in their charge, instilling hope into the organization, instilling hope and resiliency into the systems that they create for their organizations and organizational life.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, just something that landed well was the conversation also around just the warrior and elder conversation. And when I think, just tying back, I have a tribal lens for everything that we do. That's why this whole ESG thing just lands different with me. Like, coming from a tribal and tribal enterprise background, the first priority is the community, like high obligation to the community, making sure people are fed, making sure there's clean water to drink, making certain people have a roof over their head. So this whole idea of ESG, like, it's a Wall Street thing, like, straight up. And it's, here's some metrics that we need you to check the box on if you want our money. The corporation doesn't necessarily have to act in a soulful way around those metrics. It's about implementation of program. We got these boxes to check, so we build these things that check those boxes. We get the investment, life goes on. It's just a different spot than where I come from. The lens that I have I thought it really came to light with the conversation with Brian Gooden. It is like, there are warriors and there are elders, and elders provide sage counsel, and the warriors fight for everything. They're the caretakers, they're the providers, they're the ones that make certain people are cared for, right? They listen to the counsel, they take action, they're responsible for literally everything. And I think that sentiment, or that call to activation and energy, like, that landed very square, with me, and really being able to talk through, like, being a warrior doesn't necessarily mean bearing arms, right? It means fighting for the people that can't fight for themselves, and fighting for people that don't exist yet, like having that generational impact. So I really enjoyed that conversation. But just everyone that sells out to purpose, I'm in on. I am here for it, and that is my assignment. And as I understand it, is to highlight those stories. So I want to talk just for a minute about this whole process, right? Like, being part of this, what value have you experienced, or how's it influenced your perspective? Right. So influence on your perspective in what this process, how has this process added value to you? Thinking in context of, there's a lot of courageous leaders out there that are thinking about doing a thing, right? May not be a podcast, could be writing a book, could be writing a song, could be stepping out on their own, could be any kind of what feels like a large leap or a large commitment, where it's easy to have 100 reasons why not to do it. There's one reason to say yes, and there's 100 reasons to say no. Like, you guys made the decision to do this thing. Well, how's it impacted you?
Yeah. So I have a couple of things on that. I'm going to start with a concrete example, as you were talking, Chris, about ESG and soulful leadership, right? And a concrete example for me of how my thinking has evolved from doing this, and then I'll go a little bit more, broad on the process. But so we've had some conversations about ESG and the responsibilities. We've talked about the responsibility of the organization to the individual. I do believe firmly that organizations also have a responsibility to the broader community, to the environment, to steward the resources that we have, not just inside our organization, but how our organization impacts the larger community of humanity and the planet that we live on. And that belief has gotten clearer as we've continued to have, and we're going to have in our next season here, we're going to hear some more conversations along those themes. The difference for me that has become clear through this process is understanding the difference, between checking a box for a requirement and what it means to be a soulful leader. It's that soulfulness that is the differentiator, right? Are we following the letter of the law, or are we truly embodying the spirit of whatever it is the purpose of our organization is, beyond making profit? And that's where it's really powerful. In terms of the process of starting something like this, my encouragement to every leader out there who's thinking about starting something: start before you're ready. If you wait until you're ready, it's going to be a long time, and you may never be ready, or you're going to miss out on that opportunity of learning while doing. And I think that's what we've done here. Start before you're ready, and always make sure that you have a process for continuous improvement, so it doesn't stop at the shitty first draft. You continue to iterate and make it better.
Yeah. And just to pile on that, I mean, what would have happened if we had waited even a few more months? We would have had every excuse in the world to say now's not the time, right? We were just like everyone else once it got to March, April, May of 2020, just like hustling our guts out, right? And figuring out what are we going to do for clients? What are we going to do to help them survive? What are we going to help, helping with reductions in forces, helping with communications plans out to employees that were just totally up in the air, right? Helping write remote work policies, all of this stuff, right? And figuring it out for ourselves. Our client load dropped, our income dropped probably 30% over those few months, right? As people ran into cash flow issues. So we're just like spinning, grinding. And would we have started by now? I don't know. But the fact that we defaulted to action and got this going, I would just say to anyone, just to echo what Hannah said, like, don't wait. And my personal, I guess, testimonial about that is the inspiration that I've been able to receive because of meaningful conversations with people and meaningful interactions with people that wouldn't have happened without this forum is amazing. And I mean, just last week's episode, talking with Brad. I mean, I left that conversation. I left the studio that day just like wanting to be a better person, wanting to lean into my purpose even harder. A little convicted, right? Just like, oh my gosh, could I ever live with such conviction, as such an amazingly inspiring person? And like, I wouldn't have gotten that without having these conversations. So whether you're, a maker or a writer or whatever it is, like the journey is worth it. And, be a courageous leader. Like, courage is acting when there's risk. It's acting when the outcomes are unknown. A lot of times when we talk about it organizationally, like it's doing things that are new or different, or people don't understand the ROI of. And, it's asking questions that are uncomfortable or might get you in hot water with your peers, right? And I think, for creativity, it's kind of the same way. Like, people are going to say, why are you building that? Why are you doing that? Why are you spending all that time? How valuable is all of that time? Right? Same for us, right? When we lost 30% of revenue, whatever it was, and then we kept spending, let's call it 2 hours a week on average doing this instead of selling, not sure. But man, I wouldn't change the decision for sure.
Well,
yeah, totally.
And we've seen, kind of payoff in terms of that now, right? In the conversations that are in the broader community. When we meet a new leader or a new organization for the first time, they start listening to the podcast, the jumping off point on the conversation. And Luke, you alluded to the business development aspect of this, and this is not why we do it. What I'm trying to say is, yeah, we may not have focused on selling during that time. We focused our time on creating meaningful conversation, but what we're seeing is those conversations are what people are really connecting with. And it has 100% increased our ability to do business development more effectively because people get a chance to experience what we believe. And Chris, you say this all the time, and I use it as well. We attract what we believe. So the more clear we are on what we believe, the more we're going to attract people who believe what we believe. And that is true for every leader, right? So the more clearly you can articulate the vision, the purpose, the values, the commitments, all the things that you believe as a leader, you can attract the types of people that are going to be a good fit in your organization, both from a team member, employee perspective. Everybody's hurting. A lot of people, a lot of industries are hurting for people right now. Take that into consideration. And likewise with customers, right? Attracting the types of customers that believe what you believe. So there's stronger alignment and more meaningful partnership with those relationships.
Yeah. And, there's an element of market making that Chris can probably speak to better than me. But if we think 2 years ago, if we were in front of a room of 100 people and said, hey, what we do is we help organizations discover and clarify their purpose, their reason for existence, and then turn that into actionable behaviors across their entire operation. I don't know, maybe 15, 20 out of 100 would be like, oh, that sounds, yeah, I get that. There's a need for that. Right. Well, here we are now. Not that we've created a new market, right? The market was moving there. People just didn't recognize it. Like we've seen like the pent up need from workers for meaningful work and purpose aligned work. It was there. Right. But now if we got up in front of 100 people and said, hey, we help clarify organizational purpose because like, guess what? It's important. People need it. They're looking for it. And we help you turn that into behaviors that are operationalized and lived out across the entire operation, the value stream of what you do. It's not 100. We still got the stodgy old, whatever, the old school, the legacy, the whatever it is. But there's a big chunk of people that are like, oh my gosh, we need that. And that element of leaning into what we believed before it was the cool thing and the hip thing. Yeah. It should be encouraging to anyone that has a passion about something that you believe that people might think's a little quirky right now.
Yeah, and it's proof positive that like market dynamics and enterprise behaviors always fall 20 years behind science. So the academics have known this to be true for 20 years, but the odd thing is most academics stay academic. So it doesn't really get out there into the enterprise ether. It's like a very slow drip, a very dense filter.
It takes time. There's always a lag between what science knows and what business does. And I think that is starting to speed up a little bit based on just the age of technology that we live in, the availability and accessibility of information. Yet at the same time, it's one thing to read something and recognize the value of it. Another thing to implement and put it into practice, right? There's a lot of this work that's easier said than done. Yeah, we get it. How do we create meaningful change that is sustainable, and how do we create support for that change longitudinally within organizations? That's a lot of the leadership challenge, and a lot of times why we're invited into organizations to help with exactly that process.
Yeah, and I think let's kind of stay true to who we are. The book of research that our founding principles, it happened 2001 to 2007. We built new research in 2010 that is our proprietary research around leadership models in service organizations, and we continue to refine those learnings and iterate those models as we move through. So none of this is, hey, Chris's opinion or Luke's opinion or Hannah's opinion. It's a if this is true empirically, then how should these things inform the world? And then we read the market and try to dovetail these things together to create a story, maybe read the tea leaves a little bit. And that kind of is what leads me to my next question is, where are we going from here? Like, we've enjoyed the heck out of the first 99 conversations and this one. Like, so as we look towards the next 50 episodes and continuing down the road of, approaching the not suck mark of 150, um, what are we going to be talking about? Like, what are the things you guys want to explore? And I know that it could be a laundry list, so I'm going to give us a cutoff. 2 to 3 things that might be key themes for you as we move through these next 50 episodes.
Yeah, that question makes me really excited to answer. And you're right, it could be a lot. I will give a little sneak preview because Luke was in Montana with me last week, and we recorded a number of episodes with local Montana experts in different fields. And I am so thrilled. Like, on a personal level, it may have been the most fulfilling week of recording that we've done in these 2 years, just because of this is my community, and not like, I mean, just like my local community. These are my personal friends and people that I interact with who are incredibly soulful leaders, thinkers, who care about people, about the environment, about the world, and the impact that we have on it. And so I can't wait for some of those conversations to come out over the next few weeks. So for me, yeah, I think I want to continue to explore impact, right? Impact and responsibility for leaders, right? Purpose is about impact. When we're really clear and understand the impact that we want to have and be intentional about that as a leader, and the impact that we want our organization to have. And, as they say in the medical field, first do no harm. Let's get clear on how do we do no harm, and how do we make the system better? How do we make processes for people, the team member experience better? How do we make our organization as a system operate better? How do we make the economic engine better? How do we create better outcomes for all the stakeholders, including the environment we're part of? The larger the organization, the bigger the impact and the bigger the possibility for doing harm and the opportunity for repairing harm and for adding value into the world. You take resources out of the world, you add back, and it's that additive value that really creates meaningful results for organizations. So those are some themes that I'm excited to start exploring more.
Yeah, for me, I mean, we're living in historic times. I think we're going to look back on, this time period 50 years from now and just be like, oh my goodness, there was so much transformation and change. And we know that leaders are feeling confused and weary, and half of them want things to go back to how they were before. Like, I don't know how many senior leaders have been asking us this question about, like, well, how, like, shouldn't we kind of have people come back to the office? And, like, they feel this intuition that they need to go back somehow. And then the other half are like, well, what's the new normal? And as we navigate that, I'm pretty convinced that, like, we don't know the answer, and it's going to be more complex moving forward than it was. We're not going to go back to a time of less complexity, where decisions about how we do work and where we do work and when we do work and how we're compensated for work and why we do work, like, those aren't going to become easy answers. And it's going to be very contextual. And, so I guess all of that to say, what I'm really excited about is kind of practically, how do we stay resilient? How do we stay courageous? How do we keep our tanks full as leaders so that we keep leaning in? Like, we had to lean in a lot the last 2 years just to make it to today. right? How do we not give in to that temptation to like, well, now I got to go to Belize for 3 weeks, right? Which, not that that's a bad thing. If you got a ticket to Belize, like, enjoy it and send me some pictures. But that can't be our mindset. Like, we need to be hungry. We need to be leaning forward. We need to be creative. Like, the market right now is calling for our creativity and for just vigor and energy. And so what I'm excited about is, how do we give practical paths for leaders to rejuvenate, rebuild, stay resilient, and keep hungry and pushing forward? Because, the end is not in sight, and maybe there's no end, right? Maybe it's just the top of the next hill, and when we get over that, there's going to be a top of the next hill. And helping people adopt that mindset, I think, is what I'm excited about moving forward.
Yeah, that hunger, how do you, that igniter mindset, right? Staying growth, staying outward, and continuing to inspire people to be courageous. And, it, as people think about doing their things, as like when you're laying there at night before you close your eyes and go to sleep, that's when you know the things that you should be doing. And we intentionally look at that and action that, or we intentionally don't action that. I think when we shove these things off without processing them or internalizing them, like, it's how we accident ourselves into bad situations. It's the things we don't internalize, the things we pacify, and continuing the conversation about what is intentional leadership, reading other people's stories, hearing those stories, and calling out those pieces where, when they're faced with this decision, they process something internally that said, my calling is to do this thing. I know this is what I'm supposed to do. Even though it sucks, I'm going to do it anyway. It's not convenient, but it's important, right? And so that's really the idea. Do we want to do convenient work or important work? And continuing to support courageous leaders down that path, that, I want to stay focused on intentionality. But what I'm really excited about is to elevate the conversation around sustained vitality, right? Like regenerative systems. What are the things that have to be in place for high character systems to rejuvenate, recharge? Where do they draw their energy from? And why it's required to evolve our models of compensation, how we do performance development, how we lead different teams, the products we take to market. All those things have a play in healthy regenerative systems that create sustained vitality. Going back to, are we doing life-giving work, or are we doing life-depleting work? And that's the conversation I'm looking forward to elevating, because it has such far-reaching impact. So it sounds like we're going to have an intriguing third season here on Magic in the Room, but no break. Think we're done with breaks. We're not doing breaks.
We're not taking breaks anymore. We are
no more breaks.
to roll, but we will mark kind of seasons.
Yeah.
I think every 50 episodes or so, we'll mark a season, with some new thinking, new improvements. Always the eye towards incremental improvement, and definitely be on the lookout, Chris, to what you were just talking about, the episode with Lorca Smetana on resilience and resilient systems, the conversation with Brooke Loneman on how we look at resourcing, if it's an extractive model or if it's a life generating model. Just a few things to look forward to in this upcoming season.
Yeah, because there's only extraction systems and development systems, right? It's just like, I think as we all grow together, we can explore that systems thinking and become better at that. Understand there's systems dynamics in play even within our specific verticals. So I want to do, just continue to explore that together, and just be in community with the both of you and everyone that listens. And I just want to give special thanks to anyone that's ever listened to 5 seconds, 5 minutes, or 5 hours of our little podcast here. I appreciate everyone so much. And to all the people that inspire the stories. You know, the folks that we have the good fortune to work with every day, like that's where our stories come from. And those are the leaders that are on my mind as I share out and I think about the experiences that we've all had together. When I say we, I mean those leaders that are hopefully, you know, listening and the ones that we connect with and do work with every day. I want to thank them for all the opportunity they give us to learn as we do and hopefully as we win. So those are kind of my closing comments. I'll hand it off to you guys to close this out.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to both of you. Love you guys. These conversations and getting to work with you every day, you know, makes me a better leader and a better human being. And thank you. And thank you to all our guests who have given time to have great conversations. And thank you for people who listen. We appreciate it. And to the leaders that we get to serve alongside, clients, partners, I mean, you're the reason why we do this, right? And the challenges that you face every day are what we feel compelled, what I feel compelled to rise to. If I'm going to ask you to be courageous, like I get to be courageous too, and let's solve these challenges together. And so I just thank you for showing up as gritty, courageous, passionate, soulful, purpose-filled leaders in what you do. That's why we're here. So thank you.
Yes, ditto to that. Thank you, Luke, Chris, for being great friends and courageous leaders who helped me become a better leader every day because of the conversations we have and the work that we do continuously together with organizations. Thank you to the people that have inspired us to actually record our conversations. Sarah Elkins for showing us that it's possible and connecting us with Neil Hughes. Thank you, Neil, for being the first tech guy that made this possible for us. Thank you, Ben West, for picking up the baton and the producer role and helping us continue to improve every day. Thank you, Brad O'Hara, for being an awesome, for providing space in your studio, and for Awedeo in Bozeman for providing studio space and technical support when we record locally in Montana. So all of our listeners, of course, if you've ever listened to our podcast, thank you.
Absolutely. And man, what a great day. And we are almost on time. So we always have to run a couple minutes over. So thank you guys so much. Thank you to everyone that listens. Awesome. Episode 100 is in the books. Let's put it in the can and work towards 150. Thank you all so much for sharing the time. And we'll see you next time here on Magic in the Room.